So why does biodiversity actually matter? Now, this may seem like a fairly simple question which should have a fairly simple answer. It sort of does, and it sort of doesn't. Starting with the simple, life on Earth evolved in lots of different, very complex ways. This evolution has meant that some animals rely on other plants or animals for food, or even to shape the very habitat they actually live in. Some of these relationships are simple, and others are extremely complex. Some are so complex we don't know the possible consequence of removing one or more species might be on the whole habitat. There's some rather clear-cut relationships that are fairly well understood, like how elephants and beavers shape their local environment. Beavers create dams which slow the progress of water through an area, retaining water in the local environment, allowing specific species to thrive. Slowing down the water movement also reduces soil erosion and minimises the impact of drying spells. Beavers have a significant impact on the number of birds in the local area, as well as the number of amphibians. The presence of these animals has a ripple effect, as their presence or even their absence also impacts on many other animals and plants. On the other hand, elephants have both a large-scale and small-scale impacts on their habitat. Elephants will deliberately target some trees and knock them down, creating clearing or paths in the middle of a forested area. Once some of the trees are removed, light can then reach the forest floor, allowing a wide variety of smaller plants to actually flourish. Elephants can also change their habitat with a single impression of a foot, or especially a pile of droppings. You can see, if you remove the animals like the beavers or elephants from an area, you can have far-ranging implications for the rest of the life in that area. The same has been shown for animals like wolves in Yellowstone Park and numerous other examples. However, it isn't always the large, obvious items that have an impact on the habitat. One plant which is often regarded as a major nuisance, especially to hikers and gardeners, is the stingy nettle. However, due to the unfriendly nature of the leaves, some animals find it makes not only a safe place to hide, but also a useful meal. These are the caterpillars, especially those of the red admirals, small tortoiseshells, painted lady and comb butterflies, but some others will also eat the nettles. Loss of the nettles from habitat could result in a serious decline in the number of pollinators, which in turn could impact a wide variety of plants and animals. There are other key pollinators specific to a particular area of our planet, like the hummingbirds, with some flowers adapted only to be pollinated by specific birds. Even in the oceans, similar relationships develop, like between clownfish and sea anemones. The anemone provides shelter and protection for the fish, and clownfish will attack smaller fish trying to eat the tentacles of the anemone. At the same time, while sheltering the clownfish within the anemone, the clownfish is protected from larger fish. The anemone not only gets and gives protection, but the clownfish will deposit waste matter which the anemone will use as fertilizer. So any impact on the numbers of one species will also have the impact on the other. Much the same way coral and algae are also linked. Now, some of these relationships between species we are aware of, they have been studied fairly closely. There are a great many other more species out there that we haven't even got a clue about how they work or how important they are. So while it may seem that the disappearance of something like a tiny beetle is hardly worth bothering with, maybe some connection with the habitat, like there is with dung beetles and the elephants, make it vital for many other species to thrive. Removal of one or more species may result in an entire ecosystem collapsing, much in the same way as introducing an invasive species may have a similar impact. Now, currently, modern farming is having a major impact on biodiversity, whether this is in the growing of pineapples in Hawaii or palm oil production across Asia and South America. The impact of removing many native plants and animals to make way for these crops could create a ripple effect around the whole world, as some species die off before we fully realise how important they are. There are numerous plants and animals that are essential to human survival, including bees, ants, bats, plankton, fungi and birds. Loss of biodiversity could potentially threaten any one of these groups, and their loss in turn could threaten humanity. As we lose biodiversity then, we also become vulnerable to any natural change in species, as well as those changes we are forcing upon nature. Earlier I mentioned that human survival is dependent upon fungi. These fungi are called mycorrhiza, which are over 50,000 different species of fungi which live in the soil and are in a symbiotic relationship with many plants. The roots of the plants exchange sugars with the fungi and return provided with water and nutrients including phosphates and nitrates. Without these fungi, most of the crops we rely on would fail and most of humanity would starve. Some of our intensive farming may be altering the nature of this symbiotic relationship, possibly making both plants and fungi vulnerable to some unforeseen change, like a new bacteria or virus emerging, or one that even just jumped species. This potentially then could devastate the world before we even knew the threat existed. It might even be a new threat. The fungi, like many other species, are vulnerable to an extended period of drought, so droughts could drastically cut the numbers of fungi, worms, and other species essential for a healthy soil. This in turn could mean that even if the local human population survives the drought, when the rains return and they try to farm the land again, the crops may still fail. Thankfully, in most of these situations, the life in the soil rapidly returns to normal, but too much pressure on the ecosystem could cause it to collapse permanently, taking humanity with it. So to try to minimize the known or even the unknown risks to humanity, we need to maintain as much biodiversity as possible, so we may never need to know which part of the ecosystem we actually depend upon for our survival, and indeed which parts are under threat, because we remove some apparently minor link in the chain of life.